What's up guys, today we're going to be having a look at the Casablanca from Theorema. Now, to clear up a bit of confusion, Theorema and Tufina are part of the same company, they're part of the same parent company, so you may happen to see two different websites, one of Theorema and one of Tufina, and the prices do vary greatly. Currently, the Tufina website has the cheaper price, the better deal for this watch, so that's just to get that out of the way to avoid any kind of confusion. I will leave a link to the Tufina website in the description, but just keep in mind that these are the same company, which is why when you go to the Tufina website, you'll see that there's also branded as Theorema Casablanca. Now, the case it comes in is quite a nice case with that black, glossy black, piano black finish. It does look very nice. It has that center part, glass center part, so you can see the watch just lying down in there waiting to be reviewed. And it has the Theorema logo printed onto the glass. So if you're giving this as a gift, it's definitely it won't disappoint. Very nice looking case. Now, let's open this up and get right into the watch. As you can see, you will immediately notice that this is by no means a modest watch. This is definitely a piece that commands a lot of wrist presence. Not just because it's 44mm, including the crown, but also because it's a very thick watch. I mean, I think it's too thick personally. I think they should have looked to trim it down a bit, maybe by, for example, avoiding the amount of what I consider to be wasted space between the crystal and the dial itself. I think it sits a bit too low. I think they could have maybe brought it up a bit and avoided having such a thick case. And maybe had they put something down here to kind of break up this just very shiny, high polished, a golden surface, I think it would have looked a lot less bloated. So I mean, some watches, like rotary watches for example, will typically have little buttons on this part. Also Thomas Earnshaw watches have the same kind of thing when they make thick watches like this, and it does help to break down this seemingly huge, glaring, polished surface. So I would have even taken a non-functional button, to be honest, down here, because at the end of the day this doesn't have a calendar function, so I'm not sure what the button could have actually done. But yeah, I mean, I think that because there's nothing breaking up, there's no kind of pattern, there's nothing just breaking up this surface, it does look really, really big from this side. Now, if we move it onto the crown side, you'll be able to see that because the crown's in the middle, it doesn't look half as thick as it does on the other side. So you can kind of see what I'm saying there. Now, looking at the crown drawer, that is obviously very Panerai-esque. However, I don't like how hard it is to actually get it to open. It takes quite a substantial amount of force to be able to open this. It will click into place with no problem, very easily, but to get it out, it's very, very unrefined. I mean, it's very hard, and it kind of makes the whole task of adjusting the time a pain. So I'm going to compare it to something like the Citizen Grand Touring, which I have here. And the Citizen Grand Touring also has a crown guard. However, you're going to see how easy it is to actually use this. So just very, very delicate, very, very easy to push up. Let's see. So that is a lot nicer, and it feels like a much better, a much more refined piece of hardware. Now, also to give a bit of a comparison in a thickness, so you can have a bit of an idea of how thick this watch is. You can see there, compared to the Citizen Grand Touring, there is a drastic difference. Had it been closer to the Citizen Grand Touring, it would have been a lot better, in my opinion. But once again, if you're looking at this watch to begin with, you probably like the whole aesthetic of big, flashy watches. Now, if we go into the dial, we're going to see that the crystal is a sapphire coated crystal, which probably means they made a bit of a treatment with sapphire coating on the top of a normal standard crystal, which does mean that it's probably going to end up scratching. However, it's probably not going to be as dramatic as if it didn't have that coating there, but do keep that in mind that the crystal is probably going to scratch. Now, looking at the dial, I think that maybe the balance isn't as neat as it could have been, because I mean, even looking at this on the viewfinder of the camera, there's kind of nothing there to give the dial any kind of a shape besides the sub dial with the seconds hand, which I think adds a lot to the dial of this watch, and it kind of saves it from being a design that, in my opinion, wouldn't have worked, because they kind of went for the same kind of outlining a circle with the Roman numerals that I've seen in other watches, such as Thomas Earnshaw in Vancouver, if I'm not mistaken, that I've also reviewed on this channel. However, I think that in the case of the Thomas Earnshaw, they did a much better job giving this subdial with the numerals in more depth and more thickness, and it stands out a lot more by them placing it higher than the actual movement to kind of separate it and make it stand out. But on the Casablanca, I mean, there's nothing there to stand out besides the blue subdial. It's quite hard to tell the time. It's quite hard to find any kind of shape or symmetry to the dial, because it just does look like a movement, like you're looking at the movement of the watch, which once again, you're getting a skeleton automatic piece, so that's probably what you want. But I do think that they could have made it a bit easier to be legible while retaining the same aesthetic of a skeleton watch. Now, if we move into the back of the watch, that's where I think this gets really interesting, because the back is gorgeous. The back is just beautiful. Just look at that. I really, really like how they've done this kind of like a ship portal kind of little holes into the case back, how they've put little lines of text on every part in between each of these little circles. I think that makes it just looks refined, it looks sophisticated, it looks expensive. If you were to look at the back of this watch, you'd probably think it's a lot more expensive than by looking at the front. The movement has been nicely finished. This is obviously a Chinese movement that has had some work done to it, but it's been quite nicely finished, and it does look very nice with that display case back. So I mean, personally, I kind of wish that I could wear this watch the other way around, because I think that the case back, in my opinion at least, looks better than the dial. Now, if we move on to the strap that it comes with, it's a genuine leather strap with the Theorema branding on the inside, and it says etched leather on the other side. Now, this comes with a deployant clasp, and the deployant clasp is also signed, as you'll be able to see right there. Let's see if I can focus. There you have it. It's a bit scruffed up, but the deployant clasp is very cheap, to be honest. I mean, it feels cheap. It wiggles around a lot more than it should. It's fine. I mean, it serves its purpose. It does its job. But yeah, it's a cheap deployant clasp, and the strap itself, it's decent. It doesn't feel to be exactly the best quality leather, but yeah, it does have a nice aesthetic with that kind of maroon colour on it. So yeah, it is a nice looking strap. However, personally, I think I'm probably going to be changing it for a black one, because I think probably the black one is going to work better with the colour of the dial and the actual case being in gold. Now, as you can see around the crystal, you have kind of like the minute markers, which in my opinion, once again, completely subjective, but it's a bit too busy. I would have maybe preferred to see that just plain and glossy with nothing on it, because I think that, or maybe just get rid of the minute markers and leave the Theorema, because I quite like the Theorema there at the bottom, as you can see there. However, I think that the minute markers are just, they're really irrelevant in my opinion. It doesn't really add anything to the watch. I think it just makes it look a lot busier than it is. When you have a dial that's this busy already, being a skeleton dial, I don't think there's really any need to put a minute marker around the bezel, which is why you very rarely think, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's a diver watch with a skeleton dial. I'm trying to think of it. I can't think of any, to be honest, and that's probably the reason, because I don't think it worked too great. Now, once again, as I mentioned, what I do like in the dial is the seconds hand subdial. I think it's nicely done with that nice deep blue colour. I think that colour contrasts perfectly with the golden hands, and also the Theorema logo in that location looks very nice. So again, they've definitely done a good job with that part of the dial. However, here I think you'll be able to see with a greater level of detail what I mean by there being no space between the movement and that indice track that they put just on top of it. I think had they elevated it a bit more, made it a bit thicker, it would have stand out a lot more, and it would have helped greatly with the legibility of this piece. Now, this does have Luminova on the hands. It's not the best. I mean, it'll last about half an hour, then it'll kind of fade away, and you'll more or less be able to tell the time for 2 or 3 hours, but after that, it's just going to fade away completely. And you can see that the crystal is ever so slightly domed, so you can see the very slight curvature of the crystal there, and you can see how the crystal stands out just a tiny bit from the bezel, which personally I would have preferred it to be flush or to be beneath the outline of the bezel. I think that it just, once again, it adds to the look of being a thick watch. But yeah, that's pretty much the aesthetic of this piece. Let's give a close-up of the back. You can see there, very nice. I mean, just looking at it on the viewfinder, once again, it looks great. The case back is really, really good looking, really beautiful. And yeah, so there you have it. That has been the review of the Casablanca by Theorema or Tufina, whichever one you want to think of it as the owner of this watch. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for the price, it's currently going for about $350, if I'm not mistaken, on the Tufina website. Is it the best value for money? No. You can find better watches, you can find more reliable pieces by some other companies like Rotary, for example, that have a few designs that are somewhat similar to this. However, if you're looking for a piece that is really has that grandeur element, it's just gonna really stand out on your wrist. If you're really looking to make a statement with your watch, then yeah, I mean, definitely in that case, it would be a good alternative, because that's exactly what you're gonna do with this piece. And it's by no means a bad watch. It's quite solidly built. It has a decent aesthetic, it has a very nice looking case back, and it's not that expensive. So just for a fun piece, if you want to have something that maybe you can wear out on special occasions, then yeah, I'd recommend getting this piece. Once again, if you're interested in that, I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video, and I hope you enjoyed the review. Till the next time, guys, peace.